Hello and welcome to Policy Watch. I'm Vishal Dahiya, and this week we will look at two issues. First, related to the stake sale of Air India, and the second one about the electronic vehicle policy in India. So let's begin with Air India first. After the proposal for 76% strategic stake sale in Air India floated last month failed to attract any bidders, the government is now said to be considering other options, which, according to news reports, include getting Air India listed and even complete privatization. A ministerial panel is all set to meet next week to explore all options regarding the future of Air India. Meanwhile, the government has also said that it is committed to provide appropriate liquidity and financial resources to Air India for its turnaround plan. So what is the road ahead for Air India? For more on this, we are joined by two distinguished guests in the studio today. Let me start by introducing them to you. We have with us Subhomoy Bhattacharjee, consulting editor, The Business Standard, and we also have with us Mr. Vardhan, aviation expert. Let me begin with you, Subhomoy, to try and understand the entire issue relating to Air India stake sale. The 76% offer was not taken up by any bidder. One, how big is, can that be considered as a setback when we're talking about the turnaround of the Air India? And two, what now?
Well, in terms of Air India's, policy, it has gone through so many setbacks that, frankly speaking, this one isn't. You can't say that it's sudden off in a good career's life. It has actually, I suppose, got used to more setbacks than set forwards. So I wouldn't say that that's something very unusual. In fact, it would have been surprising if any of the bidders had actually come forward to have bid for Air India. Frankly, an airline with a debt of that level, 45,000, 52,000, depending on how you measure it, then in terms of its number of employees, then in terms of the fact that it's got an aging fleet, overall there is accepting for the fact that the Air India has probably the best, what you might call the flying slots abroad. Other than that, Air India, and of course, it's got an engineering team, which we can talk about later. There is really not much to enthuse an airline company. And the fact that the government said first, that only an airline company can bid. Second, it put restrictions on what sort of a company could bid. Third, it kept on saying that, you can't change the structure of Air India for 3 years. So essentially, after having put in the money, you jolly well have not only the government as a 26th partner on board, and obviously that would mean a substantial, look-see from the government. It would also mean that the partner can't really do anything much other than just tinkering around with the operational performance of the airline. It would have been really, really surprising if any airline would have bid, and considering that the world economy at this stage, civil aviation companies, none of them are looking all that good to begin with.
Okay. Let me bring in Mr. Vardhan here. Mr. Vardhan, do you agree with what Subhomoy is saying first, that what we can get a sense is that the first offer of sale was a bit restrictive? So do we need to go ahead, or rather the government needs to go ahead and tweak the stake sale policy as far as Air India is concerned in a major way to try and attract bidders, to ensure that the kind of turnaround plan which the government has in mind for this airline does become effective?
No, look, to begin with, I think government was overly optimistic, and somewhere government was given an impression that in whichever form you propose, there will be takers for Air India. So to me, this overconfidence or kind of a sense of false comfort did spoil sport, because going by the fundamentals, I have been saying it for last 3 years, that it's very unlikely that anybody will come forward, because the kind of restrictions that are there, and it's not only the financials alone. And when turning around Air India is not an impossible task. If the good management is there, even now you can look at that option and maybe you achieve much better result than what they are today. The problem is the political atmosphere is such, where not many people raise this issue, but I have been raising it again and again. The kind of any strategic sale or any strategic decision by Government of India has been subject to some of the other inquiries. I mean, if you don't do it, successive government does it, and you know, I mean, any that is now deterring investors. And the international market, you know, we should also correlate the current scenario with the financial market of the world. International market, which was looking at third world countries or the growth oriented countries 5 years ago or 10 years ago, they themselves are under severe cash squeeze, and suddenly my friend is more knowledgeable on the subject. Suddenly the American investments are picking up, so you know, they are diverting it back to their own avenues. So I think, you know, overall the world scenario is changing. So in that situation, and then the fact that this is the last year of the government, such a strategic sale, if it was to be pushed through, because even this was just the first step, thereafter it has to be followed by subsequent exercises, and it would take, even if there was a bidder, it would have taken at least 8 to 12 months for the whole process to be concluded, and by that time you are already in the election mode. I think that deterred the investors to a large extent. Plus, of course, the Air India's financial scenario and their own the other restrictions which has been described earlier. I think they are equally daunting, and that kept everybody out of it. But the new scenario, if you are coming out with new options, particularly, let's look, instead of looking at whole privatization, if they go in a more successive partial offloading, the way they are looking at putting it on the stock market and doing it, I think that would be a more feasible way of going for divestment.
Okay, Subhomoy, the two options which Mr. Harshvardhan also pointed out and which is being talked about as well, which would be rather discussed by the ministerial panel next week. One is, you know, listing Air India, the other is going in for complete privatization. So which one do you believe would be a much better option and would have more tangible, you know, achievables here?
You know, the listing, one can understand. The reason for that would be the government would say that, look, I really can't keep on putting money into it, so I need some equity support to come in from the market.
Capital infusion.
So capital infusion, that's the idea. That it's a sink into which money keeps on getting poured, and so therefore the listing. So that's one part of it. It also has some impact that you know, once the company is supposing it gets sold, then the equity portion can be sort of played around with. But as far as 100% privatization or even 74% privatization, as Mr. Harshvardhan rightly pointed out, you know, first of all, there will be very few bidders in any case. Now, what does the government do? It does it talk to the potential bidders and say, gentlemen, what do you want? Now, if you sort of, you know, work out the package which works out for one particular bidder, then obviously it will not be good for some other bidder. So you'll have to depend on whether that bidder actually comes in which case the issue of, you know, whether it's been sort of ring fenced, there are sweeteners that have been given in, would come as a question in the lots of audits that would come in.
Something which Harshvardhan was pointing out.
Absolutely. If you don't do that, then you're essentially, you know, flying in the wind and flying in the dark. You don't have an idea which way exactly would it work on. So essentially, Air India right now is caught between a problem that if the government tries to make it attractive for a particular bidder, it will definitely run the risk of being questioned. If it doesn't, then there's no bidder that's going to come along. So 100% privatization again would have the same issue, that what exactly should the government as the owner try to think of in terms of offering for Air India's future roadmap.
Okay, so you're also saying that listing might be a good idea, as Harshvardhan is pointing out. Harshvardhan, final comments from you that if at all, you know, this option is considered, and in which way, one, you know, the government can move ahead, and two, what would be the future roadmap here for the Air India's turnaround? What are we looking at? The time frame, the capital involved, and the effort involved as well?
Look, you know, there are 2-3 things which are very significant here. Firstly, listing would give not one but few potential investors to enter into the scene and closely monitor to what extent they should bite the bullet. That is the first thing. You know, they will have the first-hand feel. Today, they are all looking from the outside. Once you have the listing and even the private, even a limited stake sale takes place with the private investors, they would have a right to actually investigate into what is happening in the Air India. So to some extent they would have a realistic idea what it is. You know, today everybody is just looking at the figures and deciding whether it is worth it or not. They would have some feel, look and feel of the organization. Secondly, the turnaround is not a very difficult task. It is essentially related to the autonomy you give to the management and accountability you hold. You know, today neither you have an autonomy nor you have an accountability of the management. It's a very confused system. So you have to decide that with listing to what extent you will have the right of individuals to promote. You know, take for example the banks. They were partially, the listing was done and the partial equity was sold. But then what was the role the shareholders could play? You know, it still remained the management and the government run organization. So I think government has to consciously realize that if they are willing to divest 100%, they should firstly be willing to divest their own authority in this organization so that the organization start working as an organization, not as a government department.
Okay, so clearly, as our guests are pointing out, that listing of Air India might be a good option here to ensure capital infusion, but the final call will be taken by the ministerial panel, which will meet next week to decide as to what now needs to be done for the turnaround of Air India. And as Mr. Harshvardhan also pointed out, turnaround of Air India is not that difficult a task. We'll take a short break here, but when we come back, we will take up the issue of the policy about electric vehicles in India. Stay tuned.
Abiotic stresses are very, very important because particularly with issues of climate change where there are vagaries of the monsoon. Fortunately, particularly in rice itself, there is a lot of work that has been going on in this regard. We made improved Samba Masuri. We identified 3 genes. That was what the initial work was very important. Now we find that we have tested more than 1,000 isolates of this bacterium from all parts of the country. Transgenic technology and marker assisted selection are both converging to the point where essentially the net result of all of it is that the capabilities of biotechnologies to improve crops is enhancing tremendously.
Watch Eureka with Dr. Ramesh V. Sonti, Director, National Institute of Plant Genome Research on Saturday at 4 p.m. and Sunday 12 noon only on Rajya Sabha television.
In 4 years of Modi government, today watch the impact of labour reforms on the common man.
हमारे जो पीएफ कटता है उसमें हमारा ईएसआई भी कटता है, जो हम बीमार पड़े तो वहाँ ईएसआई जाके इलाज करवा सकते हैं।
ऐसा नहीं कि नियम तो पहले भी थे, कानून भी थे, लेकिन उसका पालन मुझे लगता है जो वास्तव में होना शुरू हुआ है वो 2014 में मोदी सरकार आने के बाद ही हुआ है।
यूनिवर्सल सोशल सिक्योरिटी कोड एक आ रहा है, मीन्स देश का कोई भी व्यक्ति जो सोशल सिक्योरिटी है इससे वंचित नहीं रहेगा।
जो कंस्ट्रक्शन में काम कर रहा है उसे पता नहीं होता था कि मेरे क्या है, मुझको क्या मिलना चाहिए। आज सरकार के अवेयरनेस के कारण ये सबको नीचे तक कदम जा रहा है।
4 years of Modi government, only on Rajya Sabha television.
Welcome back. Let's now take a look at the future of electric vehicles in India and the related guidelines. With ever increasing fuel import bill and pollution levels in all major cities, the electric vehicles have a very important role to play in putting a check on both. Government has set a target of 4% electric vehicles of the overall sale of new vehicles over the next 5 years, starting 2018-19. Government has also decided to promote zero-emission technologies. A 15-point action plan to aid car manufacturers to switch from internal combustion engine, that is ICE, to electric vehicles or EV is under consideration. ISRO has also called upon industry leaders to make bids to avail its indigenously developed lithium-ion cell technology. So what are the challenges in this particular sector and what all can be done to overcome those challenges in addition to the government roadmap for increasing the number and use of electric vehicles in India? For more on this, we are joined by now another guest in the studio. Let me introduce her to you, Ms. Akshima Tejas. She is Assistant Director of TERI, and Mr. Subhomoy is still with us. Let us begin with you, Subhomoy, to try and understand the entire concept of electric vehicle, use in India, and how, at what stage are we? At a very nascent stage, and what are we aiming for?
You know what? I'll skip that point about which stage are we in to a specialist to Akshima, because she would be able to tell us about it. Why are we looking at? Let me look at the policy issue. The policy issue is that it all started last year when Mr. Nitin Gadkari, as a road transport minister, said that we would almost bludgeon the car makers to go on to complete electric vehicles by 2030. In fact, the discussion became intensified thereon. But as soon as he made that statement, different interest lobbies took over. So at one level, we had the car manufacturers, SIAM. SIAM basically pushed back very strong. And it wanted other ministries to come in, which is quite right, because that's the way they would be trying to push back. So Niti Aayog came in, Ministry of Heavy Industries came in, and Ministry of Heavy Industries finally has, in February this year, said that no, we don't have 2030 as the deadline. It is a much more granulated deadline, some of which you talked about. But basically, what does it show? That the Indian automobile manufacturers, remember, India is one of the world's largest, going on to be probably the second largest automobile manufacturing center in the world. Huge amount of investment has come in from the automobile guys, and they have invested in internal combustion engine, the powertrain technology, so many and so forth. Obviously, they would want that investment to depreciate, and they would want the time level. They think 2030 is too early a time for them to be able to make good on that investment.
Have a return on it.
So while the government is telling them that push on for the new technology, because remember, the electric technology is a totally different ball game from the internal combustion engine. The number of moving parts are much less. It's about 3 lakh there, and moving in a combustion engine is just 30 in an electric vehicle. To set on to a new technology, these companies don't have any additional first mover advantage. They'll all be starting off. To be able to do that, they have already, remember, while they've already established their positions in the internal combustion engine, now for them to start off afresh is asking them to take a huge financial technological leap. The technology is not new. I mean, in the sense, the technology is becoming more and more available over the world, but they would have to get into it. And for them to gradually abandon the stuff that they already have, this is where the pushback is coming. The government, one of the good things the government has done is to ensure that EESL, the government agency, has decided to buy a particular number of electric vehicles every year. I think it's about 1 lakh.
Cars.
So those, but remember, that also right now is looking difficult because the target has been scaled down. Mr. Sanjeev Kumar was saying that we don't have that ability to, I mean, we aren't going to get that many cars. But so essentially what has happened is India started with a bang. It has attracted attention, but after that it has sort of slipped back a bit, considering what China is doing, which has become the mecca of electric cars in the world.
We'll go to the China part as well and try and compare that. But let's first go to Akshima with the first question. At what stage is India's electric vehicle industry is right now, according to you? And also, all these points made by Subhomoy specific about the hurdles we have right now. Is that the only one about the auto industry trying to push back, or is there something else as well which needs to be taken into consideration right?
I would say that we are definitely at a very nascent stage for sure. We've not kind of moved forward. I go back to 2010. We were selling about 20,000, 25,000 electric low-powered scooters when the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, they launched an incentive scheme for the same. That scheme was withdrawn. The sales came down. Then FAME scheme came, which is again providing incentives for scooters, auto rickshaws and electric cars. Again, the sales went up. So if you see the annual sales, we've not kind of graduated, beyond low-powered scooters to be, when we see the stats. And also in terms of, electric cars, the sales have, been in the range of 500 to 1,000 to 2,000. So when you look at sales, definitely, I mean, we're in a country which is selling, 3 million vehicles, 3 million cars per year. I mean, this is just not even a drop in the ocean.
I'm just putting it, but if you take that in context, is that a realistic target which has been set about having 4% of the overall, sale of, vehicles as the electric vehicles over the next of 5 years, period of 5 years, given the fact that the figures you're pointing out has not gone beyond 25,000?
4% perhaps is still slightly ambitious. So, we did some numbers, and what, at least I can say at this moment, say for cars, for example, is that we just don't have the production capacity. So right now the production capacity, total Mahindra plus Tata would be in the range of, say, 12,000. So, I mean, if you do all the maths, you'll say that, by 21, 22, you may be selling even, it will still not be 1%. But there are game changers which we are, hearing. If Maruti Suzuki, as they are promising by 2021, have 35,000 electric cars being produced, that could be a game changer. So I think there are lots of things to be watched, but, just based on what's happening now and just looking a bit into future, I still feel 4% is a bit ambitious even as of now.
Okay, there's one more question. You spoke about the game changer. One thing which has come up of late is that ISRO asking the industry leaders to go ahead and collaborate as far as lithium-ion technology is concerned. How big is that a game changer?
I think it's very important. One of the key barriers which industry in general and overall, which is being pointed out, is the cost of battery, the cost of lithium-ion battery, and which almost makes, half of the price of the new vehicle. So it's very important for India to tackle it, not only from the point of view of lowering the cost of the vehicle, but from many other considerations. I mean, for the very basic reason why you want to get away from ICE is that you want to reduce your import dependence. So you don't want to be dependent on, outside world for, lithium-ion batteries. So from that perspective also, reducing the cost of the vehicle, being more, self-dependent as an economy as far as the fuel of the vehicle is concerned. So I think it's critical. I mean, what ISRO is offering is definitely something that needs to be pushed and taken up by the industry.
Okay, wonderful. We're running short of time, but you mentioned Subhomoy, China. So if we do a comparative analysis here, what should be our policies vis-a-vis China specifically, because it's a huge electric vehicle market and they've done good. They're much more ahead. So do we take a leaf from their guide here, or do we have to develop our own aspect here given the domestic conditions and all those factors which you mentioned?
Yeah, to take on what Akshima is saying, the lithium-ion battery, we have a national energy storage mission. We've announced it about a couple of years ago, but we haven't been hearing anything on it. Now, that is exactly the place where the battery technology should have been curated, incubated, and sort of seen to it what's happening. So it's not a question of taking on from China. The point is that if we are enthusiastic about electric vehicle, we have to make some trade-offs. Okay. For instance, one of the things that we have to is to see that some amount of technological obsolescence will happen. Who picks up the cost? And does the industry have the nerve to pick up the cost? Will the government sort of be able to push it for it? And if that is so, then how will that be structured through? Because that will come into the pricing, of the electric vehicles. And that would have to be factored in before any appreciable number of vehicles come on the road. I think the government is saying that we'll take an easier way out. We'll just go in for the electric scooters. By 2030, they're saying all the scooters would be, two-wheelers would be on electric. But again, well, that's a fair enough point. But then we are skirting the larger question that what happens with the four-wheelers? Okay. Let's put the larger question to the domain expert here, and quickly, if you could sum it up for us, Akshima, that in terms of policy, what exactly you believe should be done to ensure that this larger question, which Subhomoy was also pointing out, is addressed in the long run?
I think first of all, we do need a policy, and I think for the last 2-3 years we've been going, backward, forward as far as an EV policy for the country is concerned. So first and foremost, it's very important, and an associated issue with it is the institutional setup, because right now, you would see electric vehicles, they're falling under purview of Ministry of Road Transport, DHI, Niti Aayog. Ministry of Power. So I think we need definitely some kind of an institutional, coordination, some kind of an umbrella body which can say, okay, this is really the electric policy, this is our way forward, and this is how we are going to go ahead. So I think a lack of that would not, lead us anywhere, because right now we do, definitely we've taken tiny steps forward, but we still see some kind of, institutional, I won't call it competition, but there is some kind of lack of coordination that is stopping us from moving forward. Whether we're still promoting hybrids and electric, what kind of targets we are talking about, whether it's 40%, whether it's 100%, whether it's 4%. So I think in general there needs to be a lot of clarity, and to add to that, I think beyond policy, definitely we have to have a policy, but I would also want to add that we need a lot of pilots on ground. This is a phase, we need to start testing. We need not kind of target very high. Start small pilots, 40 vehicles here, 50 vehicles somewhere, to just experience whether this technology works for us, how much we need to improve, what is that we need to invest in terms of R&D. So all of that, because that is where we will, learn back from, and, go back in terms of, a stronger roadmap.
Okay, so there are several aspects to it. While, as our panelists are pointing out, that we've taken small but important steps as far as use of electric vehicles and increasing their number is concerned. But what needs to be done right now is better coordination between several government agencies, and both the government as well as the industry to move hand in hand to realize that particular target or achieve the target which is being set. You can catch this episode on YouTube as well, and you can send in your suggestions and feedback to us as well. That's all this week in Policy Watch. We'll come back again next week with a different topic and different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.